Welcome to the FML podcast, the podcast on a mission to uncover actionable insights, explore the latest trends, and to catalyze your fintech's growth. Join Growth Gorilla's founder and managing director, Sachdev, and some of fintech's hardest-hitting marketers and leaders.
Welcome everyone to this episode of the FML podcast. Today we're joined by Thomas Ketchell, CEO at Curvo. Thomas, thank you very much for joining us today. Why don't we jump straight in and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey journey so far with Curvo?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Shamir. So I'm Thomas Ketchell. I'm 33 years old and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Curvo. And so I started my entrepreneurial journey after university, where I started my first company, which is called Sutori.com, which is an education technology platform. And I co-founded that with Yoran, and the two of us set up Curvo. Had the idea about a couple of years ago, and now we're launching it in Belgium.
Do you want to just take us through what Curvo is, what it does, and the problem you're trying to solve?
Curvo essentially is an investment app, and it improves the financial well-being of the next generation of Europeans. And we do this through the power of index investing. Right now, we're just in Belgium, but you can create an account in a few minutes, and you basically get the possibility of investing in a diversified portfolio of index funds, tailored to you, your goals, and personality. What Curvo does is that it takes care of all the complexities related to good investing, and you can start from 50 euros, so it's really accessible to anyone. It's a super simple app, and we just launched it in October 2021. And so, we're still in that growth stage right now.
I really, really like the concept of investing in index funds, the whole grow rich slowly. So I'm keen to sort of dig into, well, first and foremost, what led you to building Curvo? What is the key sort of problem that you were trying to solve there?
So with our first company, Sutori, we were actually living in the States. And so, we saw the proliferation of apps like Robinhood, and then also index investment apps like Wealthfront and Betterment. And the whole time we were out there, we kind of kept asking, why is there no European equivalent? And so we saw there was a lot of stuff like building up in the UK, some stuff in Germany, but Belgium was still like a very untouched kind of market. The problem that we saw was the problem that we faced ourselves. Like, we didn't really know what type of pension we would have or what kind of retirement. And being entrepreneurs, we weren't quite sure, how the whole system worked. And so that was really the problem that we were trying to solve, was basically our financial future. And then we realized by talking to friends and family that a lot of millennials and Gen Z are kind of at this point where we're not really going to have the reliance on the state to give us a proper retirement. And so that's linked to, obviously, the increasing pressure due to changing demographics. Political leaders are not doing what's necessary to prevent this kind of future crisis. And so one thing that we looked at was obviously savings accounts. And as we know, interest rates are pretty terrible and inflation keeps going higher and higher. That's when we realized that you have to actually invest your money. And so we started in the realm of, doing stock picking, made a lot of mistakes along the way, and then we really found this kind of investment philosophy, which is very passive, and then putting money into index funds and ETFs. And so that's the problem that we wanted to solve, is to make that aspect as easy as possible, and to make investing, demystify it and make it simple for anyone who can just start from a very low amount and kind of set up themselves for the future.
I think the ethos, or at least my understanding of it is that if you invest a regular amount into index funds over a significant period of time or reasonable period of time, ultimately the compounding effect will mean that you end up with a very, very large pot at the end of it, as opposed to trying to beat the market, effectively speaking. What I'd be interested to sort of dig into, find out, is almost like the nuances of the app. So do each of the pots that you create, or the functionality of the app, does it create different mixes of ETFs based upon individual needs and requirements, goals? I'd be really, really curious to find out more about that.
One issue that we saw is that, in Belgium, when you start investing into ETFs, there's actually a lot of complexity around it because of tax reasons. And so you have to choose the right kind of fund. So you have to choose a cumulative fund rather than a distributive. So distributive is one that like gives out dividends. And why you choose an accumulating fund is because in Belgium, there's no tax on capital gains for stocks, which is crazy. So it's one of the only countries, in the Western world that doesn't have a tax for that. But a lot of investors in Belgium make the mistake because they don't know. So they buy funds which give dividends and distributive funds. And so they have to pay a 30% tax on that. And so what we realize is that there is a lot of complexity to choosing your portfolio of ETFs. And so with Curvo, we just wanted to make it as simple as possible. And so, we follow a traditional approach in terms of we provide a questionnaire within the app, which basically assesses you on your tolerance for taking risk. Do you like to take risk? How much do you actually want to invest? What are your goals? Like, what are you investing money for 5 years down the line, 10 years, or is it 20, 25 years? And so based on all of those answers, a portfolio is tailored to you. And so usually it's a mix of stocks and bonds, depending on kind of your age and your investment goals and horizon.
I think the unique thing about Curvo is, we've recorded about sort of 20 odd episodes now, and every single founder or head of marketing or CMO that I've spoken to has been for a company that's been VC backed. Curvo is our first bootstrapped fintech that we've had on the show. My big question is, why did you choose to go down that path and not take funding?
I don't think there's a right path and a wrong path. I think with Curvo, what we realized is that our first company was venture-backed, Sutori, and we realized a lot of positives with being venture-backed, but we also saw quite a few negatives in the fact that, we didn't really have a product market fit when we raised money, and so we misallocated a lot of our funding. And what we decided with Yoran and I was we wanted to build the foundations of the business the right way. And so that's why we've chosen the bootstrapped model for now, in order to get closer towards product market fit, or at least an idea of if we're going to reach product market fit. And what we also realized is that we didn't want to put too much pressure from day one. So, raising seed rounds quite early in a company's journey is always risky because you're still not sure if customers are actually going to use it and they're going to love the product. And so we just wanted to really go in with a product in the market with customers who are using us and try and get that semblance of product market fit. Long term, we actually are going to raise money, I think, because, running a fintech company is definitely not cheap, especially at the early stages. And so, we've been fortunate to obviously have our first company and be able to live off that. But I think long term now, as we're getting more and more customers, we're realizing that, now is a good time for us to raise money and kind of grow the company that way. But again, the fact that we've been bootstrapped means that we can kind of choose it more on our terms and kind of have the timeline for investing based on us and if we're ready and if the market's ready too.
I think regret's probably a strong word, but have you ever had second thoughts and think, oh shit, we should have taken some VC funding? Or are you absolutely 100% happy with the decision that you made?
Yeah, I think it's quite tough. One thing we do at Curvo is that we phone every single customer. So every time someone signs up, downloads the app, starts using it, we actually phone them just to get insights and get feedback from their experience. And that whole process, there's only 2 of us on the Curvo team. So, we're talking about hundreds of phone calls. And all of that process is very time intensive. So, there are parts of me that kind of would have hoped to kind of have an account manager or someone to help on that side. So definitely, I feel like if you do the bootstrap model, it is a bit slower. But I think, again, we just wanted to get the foundations of the business right. And I think founders are the best positioned usually to do this kind of early work to really get that insight and then work towards building our vision.
Being an agency, I mean, we're obviously a service business, so it's kind of the side I've always been. So I've never really, got my head around basically taking money from somebody else. And I think it's a hard concept to a degree for myself to come to terms with. And actually, I quite like the idea of just being, master and commander of and being able to make the final decision without those sort of external pressures. But then equally, having said that, you can go faster if obviously you've had a burst of funding. Take me through the journey with building the product. How long did it take you to build a product, get it out the front door, and get it to beta? What did that journey look like?
Yeah, so it was really tough. We were very naive at first. We came from a web background, obviously, where we just launched the product and got it into, thousands of schools around the world. And we kind of thought, well, we're going to build this app and we're going to just spread it around. But obviously, regulatory-wise, you can't really do that for a product like Curvo, which invests in the stock market. And so we spent, a good part of nearly 2 years working on the legal aspects and finding a partner to launch the product with. So, Curvo in itself, Yoran and I, two of us couldn't really get the licenses to get the product out there. So we had to find a partner who shared the vision, who shared kind of the idea of solving the pension crisis for all Europeans. And so that was in itself a long process. So speaking to a lot of different financial firms, speaking to the regulators, like trying to get as much insight as we could to get the products out there, at least the working version. We spent a long time working with our partners. And then in that time, we built basically a simple landing page where we would collect emails, set up phone calls with prospects and prospective clients and sort of get that feedback of what they wanted in a product. And then while we were kind of gathering those insights, we were at the same time building parts of the app, but also making sure that we could launch legally in Belgium. In the end, that whole process was around 2 years. And so we finally launched in October 2021. There was a whole process. And I think because we were bootstrapped as well, meant that we had to do a lot of the legwork as well in terms of legal and everything related to that.
To be fair, I kind of empathise. One of the first companies that I set up was a stockbroking firm. We had to get the regulation for that. And I remember having to answer all the questions that the FCA gave us. And then we thought we'd done it all. And then they asked us for a whole bunch of financial forecasting. The one thing that we completely forgot about is that they asked us for the compliance manual. And we didn't have one. So we basically had to write this compliance manual from scratch. We may have taken inspiration from one or two other ones, but fundamentally we had to write it from scratch. And it took us about a year to get our license in the end. And it was just painful. But you've launched now and you can onboard users. So kind of getting into the acquisition side of things. What's your user acquisition strategy? What does that look like? How are you finding people and onboarding them?
Obviously, being bootstrapped means we don't really have a large marketing budget. So what we've tried to do is really focus on, again, the foundations of the business. And what we thought would be a really good foundation is having good quality content so people can find us through Google. And so that's always been the core of what we wanted to do, is solve particular Belgian problems that Belgian investors are having and become the kind of number one resource for a Belgian looking for what taxes do I have to pay as a Belgian investor, what type of ETF do I have to buy, what's the best brokerage firm to use in Belgium. And so we took that kind of strategy of really this bottom of the funnel content and really focus on, optimizing for search engines. And so that's how we acquire and still to this day acquire a majority of our customers is through Google. And so what we took is that we wrote a lot of this content. So we're talking, over 35 pieces of original content and deep dives and how-tos, which we wrote and published. We also saw that YouTube is a great spot to start growing as well. And so a lot of our written content, we repackaged it and repurposed for YouTube. That channel's only got 300 odd subscribers. It's still small, but a lot of the viewers who come onto those videos, they're very good customers for us because, we've solved a particular pain and then we're also presenting Curvo at the same time. So the acquisition has been primarily kind of that SEO. And now obviously with the product being launched for the last, 6-7 months, we're seeing more and more word of mouth referrals, which, is always a good sign for a product. Obviously the markets are suffering a lot in the last couple of months. So people aren't really sharing it as much as they were in the early days, but we know that will pick up again once the economy picks up again.
I think word of mouth is the early indicator of product market fit, right? So if you're doing that with minimal budget and you're still growing, then you must be feeling cautiously optimistic is probably the phrase in that case.
It always, it's like a roller coaster. You know what it's like with startups. Like some days you think, yes, we're onto it. Other days not so good. One thing that we've seen a lot of competitors in the UK and in the Netherlands and in Germany, they do a lot of good referral systems where you give like a free share or you give, a monetary value if you refer a friend. And so obviously being bootstrapped, we've kind of limited ourselves, so we can't really do that kind of monetary value. But what we're seeing is that so many customers are actually sharing it because they see value in the product and they really appreciate the way we're building with an open and transparent manner.
You've been doing a lot of building in public. And I kind of want to dig into that because actually I haven't spoken to anyone who's actually done that. How do you think that's helped Curvo?
It was like a conscious decision that we made. So, we started seeing a more movement of startups, especially like indie hackers, like publish their numbers, like very small one or two person teams. And one thing that we said from the start was we want to build a very different financial company. And a lot of companies, they say, yeah, we're open, we're transparent, but they never really publish like fully the numbers. And so from us, from day one, we said, right, no vanity metrics, we're just going to publish the real numbers. And so from the start, we've constantly just published the amount of people who sign up, the amount they invest, the average amount they invest, the answers to the questionnaires, the demographics, and everything is public on, Curvo's website. So you go to curvo.eu and then you have like an Our Numbers section. And what's funny with that is obviously when the markets are dropping a lot, I think our average performance, as we're recording this is like, -9, -10%. And so you'd think that a lot of people will be like, why am I investing in something that's losing money? However, it's having an opposite effect where people are really like, well, of course it's losing money because it follows the global economy and the market. And at least they're being open about it and transparent. And so people adhere to that, I think, a lot more, and they trust you because you're sharing the data. You're not, hiding anything behind long key investor document informations and fact sheets. It's all public. It's all listed. I think it's like a fundamental value of the way we're doing Curvo. I hope that we can really continue to push those limits as well and continue making things public because I do think it helps. Having said that, it's also with the goal of getting more financial companies to share this data as well. So, if we can push banks to share more about the fees that they're charging customers, that's good. And, we don't want a product which has, 15 different asterisks and puts it onto the customer to figure out everything. So we really try and push as much as possible. I'd say one thing that we're not doing so well in terms of building in public, we're not sharing as much the failures as we thought we would. And that's something, it's just because it takes a lot of time to kind of, write up an experiment that we're doing and then publicly share that and then get feedback. But we're trying more and more to do that.
Have there been any major failures that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so in terms of marketing, we've been trying different avenues. Obviously SEO is working well, the content is running, we're getting customers. But one of the things we realized is that there's not sufficient amount of young Belgians using Google to find an investment product like Curvo. And so obviously we knew the keyword volume and the search was going to be low, but we didn't realize it'd be that low, I think. And so what we realized is we need to acquire customers through different channels, obviously. And so one avenue that we thought would be really successful is obviously TikTok. And so, one of the campaigns that we ran was one of our customers, Charlotte. She came to us and she said, look, I love Curvo. I love what you're doing. I want to help you craft content for TikTok. And so, we ran a whole campaign. We did 30 videos with her. We scripted them. We worked together. We filmed them. We did some like trend videos. It was very difficult for Yoran and I because we don't actually use TikTok. So it was all kind of alien. And then so we published all this campaign, which in the end, hasn't yielded any results. And it was a lot of work to put in. So, that in itself is really difficult to do social well. That's something that I want to kind of share to other entrepreneurs as well and publish like what we learned from doing TikTok and kind of, I think, the things that we can definitely improve moving forward.
Have you given up on the channel, or do you think your messaging wasn't quite right? What do you think points of failure were?
Yeah, it's really tough. So I don't want to dismiss it because it's the fastest growing social media in Belgium, at least. I think it's probably worldwide, to be honest, anyway. The numbers are crazy. So Monzo in the UK, they did one video with like this plushy toy and that had like 14 million, views, which is crazy for a brand, probably without paying it. It was all organic. So, I definitely see there's a lot of potential. I think it's just one of the things I think, we didn't really know if we create a company account or if we create a personal account. we were really trying to like kind of, work the algorithm to try and get some sort of virality. But maybe the actual way that we distributed the content was not quite right, in the sense that, Belgium is in itself a complex country to do social media, in that, it's Brussels is very international. English is spoken a lot, but then you've got Flanders all in Dutch, and then in the south it's in French and in Wallonia. And so, we did all our content in English, and, I think maybe it would have been better to just target in Dutch, which is, 80% of our customers are from Flanders anyway. So, I think that's one of the learnings, that we should be experimenting more on the language side of it, which again is why a lot of companies don't like launching in Belgium, because it's got this kind of complexity.
It's not a typical, I mean, from the UK, most companies will launch into probably one of either the Netherlands or Germany, I'd probably say. Netherlands, I think, because of the proximity, and I think culturally they're quite similar. And I think Germany, because actually the financial education is actually quite high over there, and it's the GDP is obviously really, really strong. So yeah, Belgium's an unusual one.
Yeah, we get that a lot, and I do understand it, and I think that's why we were so excited to do it in the country that we grew up in, because there's just not that much competition. So it's kind of like an open field in that sense. For example, like we work with Vanguard, and we offer Vanguard funds in Belgium, obviously, to our customers. Vanguard, for them, there's no interest to launch in Belgium. It's just too much of a headache in terms of legal and, the language stuff. So you can see that a lot of these companies choose, obviously, markets where they know they can get high growth. And we're going the opposite way. We're doing the hard one first, hopefully, that we can be successful in, and then we can kind of repeat that playbook across different European countries.
You mentioned, obviously, that, when the time's right, you'll probably go get funding. I suppose, what's the timeline like for Curvo? What does the next sort of 12 months, 24 months look like for you guys?
To give you some numbers, so since October 2021, we have, roughly 330 customers who've invested money. So we only regard a customer once they've invested money. We've had over 1,100 downloads to the app. But again, it's more of a vanity metric, because if we don't convert them and they don't invest money, then there's no need for us to categorize them as customers. So we're really focused on that number and growing that activation. And so the goal within the next 2 years is 12,500 Belgians investing through Curvo. If we can get to that number, we're really at a sustainable level as well, based on, the investments that they're going to make, the customers. And then we'll be in a better position to say, okay, we've made it work in Belgium. Now, can we repeat the playbook in Italy? Can we repeat it in Portugal? Currently, we have a wait list for every European country. So we have, buckets of countries where people are finding Curvo and are signing up for the wait list. So that's something that we're not really focused too much on yet, but we know when the time comes, hopefully we can take everything we learned in Belgium and see if we can replicate it.
So did you say 12,500 in the next 12 months?
In the next 24 months, yeah.
24 months, sorry, yeah. So it's still a pretty big target, though, to be fair. It's quite, when I speak to sort of quite, fledgling fintech, I kind of always get quoted the number of, we need 10,000 active users in 12 months. And I always think, that's actually quite a big number when you think about it. So you think, you've got, an acquisition cost of somewhere between, for investment platforms anyway, between sort of 50 and 250, certainly in Europe and UK, 50 to 250 euros, something like that. Simple maths will tell you that's 7-figure budgets that you're talking about. So I suppose then the question is, are you going to need the VC money to catalyze that growth in that case then? Or do you think you can do it through more of the sort of hand-to-hand combat tactics combined with word of mouth?
Yeah, it's a really good point. So, the industry as a whole has this huge, high cost of acquisition problem. When we first started out, we started to speak to other fintech founders, and they were telling us, similar numbers to what you said, like around 300 to 350 euros per customer, which we were just balking at. It's crazy. Like, there's so much money. And then, you really need a strong customer lifetime value to make, any kind of return on that. And so that's why we've tried to do things as differently as possible to try and see if we can have a low cost of acquisition and find channels which are repeatable. And so that's kind of the whole process that we do, is this experimentation. So, that TikTok campaign obviously hasn't worked. okay, what can we learn from it? How can we improve it going forward? And can we get some sort of virality there where we can have a low cost of acquisition, for example, without having to pay for lots of ads? And so that's really like the way we think about each marketing channel. It's really about that distribution and how can we get it at a low cost. So for example, one of our partners in Belgium is a company called It's Me. And what they do is they do the whole kind of know your customer process in the sense that your Belgium ID card is directly within this app. And, I think it's 85% of Belgians use it now because you needed it to log in for your COVID certificates. So everyone started using it. And what they did is that they integrate with partners like us. So as a customer of Curvo, you don't have to take a photo of your ID card to complete your account. It's automatically put into this It's Me. And so that partnership worked really well for us because they promoted Curvo and spoke about us as a partner, and they ran some Facebook ads, for example, to kind of promote Curvo. And what we noticed was, nearly 60, 70 app downloads because a third party was talking about us. And so we're just trying to find all these channels and ways that, we can get that validation, that trust, getting more in the media, building that kind of use case. And then if we manage to get funding, then we know where we're going to spend money and hopefully do that same process of experimentation to get those customers. In terms of the target, it is a bit ambitious, I think, the 12,500, but it's also what drives us, as much as possible. And we took the numbers similar to the growth that we had with our first company, Sutori. I'd say it's a bit harder now because we had a freemium model with our first company, and now it's really about people investing money. So yeah, fingers crossed we get close to it.
I suppose my final question really is, and again, kind of sort of circling back to the beginning about talking about being bootstrapped, what's your sort of top tip or pearls of wisdom that you could share with fintech founders that are going down the bootstrap route? What would you say to them?
Yoran and I are very lucky to have a first company that's running and provides us a salary, so we didn't have to work for free for 2 years on Curvo. So, we are fortunate with that. But I'd say if you are a bootstrap fintech founder, the best is to really speak to your customers. And, I know you hear it a lot from other entrepreneurs, but it really is important. And so, we didn't go full into Curvo until we were sure that we were actually solving a problem. And that we got from, solving our own problem, which was, related to our own pension and our own retirement. But then speaking to friends and then expanding that net was speaking to just people that we didn't know and then getting their feedback, getting to the root of what their problems are, like their problems with their bank, their problems with online brokers, their problems of doing it themselves. And that's when really we focused on, this is the problem that we're solving. And this problem is big enough that we can get as far as we can bootstrapped. And then, to be honest, we'll be in a better position to raise money because we've done all of this process ourselves, which means that our first round that we do get is going to be more favorable on our terms rather than, getting the money and then figuring out all of those answers.
Thomas, that's been incredibly interesting. Let's wrap up with our quickfire round. What podcasts are you listening to at the moment?
So I listen to The Rational Reminder. So it's with Ben Felix, and so it's a great podcast. So Ben Felix is a Canadian wealth manager, and he publishes a lot of YouTube videos. So I recommend you go look at them. And what I love about that podcast is that he just shares a lot of the research that he's reading, and he's a very rational investor, and he's very inspiring. So that's a great podcast to listen to.
What books are you reading now that you'd say you would recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, so one of the best ones I keep recommending to other entrepreneurs is The Mum Test by Rob Fitzpatrick. It is such a good book. And honestly, I mentioned earlier that we do a lot of phone calls with our customers. And so what the Mum Test taught us a lot is just to ask the right questions and not ask the questions for the answer that you want to hear, but really push yourself. So I highly recommend that. And it's a great book.
Awesome. What's other than Curvo, what's your favorite fintech app or product?
One of my favorite is actually Splitwise, which is obviously a budgeting app, and budgeting is more like tracking expenses, and I use it with my partner, and I just love that app. And then, when we go on holiday with friends and then we just have it all on Splitwise. And so I love fintech that solves a problem like really easily, really smoothly. And, in Belgium, we lack a lot of products that you guys have in the UK, which, I'm a bit jealous of because I think there's still so much opportunity throughout continental Europe for like good products to help like spending and budgeting.
What's the best bit of life advice you've ever received?
In the startup context is speak to your customers. Like it sounds so simple, but it's so important. And honestly, I think a lot of founders make the mistake of building it and then hoping everyone's going to come and use it. But no, I think it's building those relationships, speaking to people, and then figuring out really what's the pain that you're solving.
I think that's a distinguishing factor from the really super successful entrepreneurs to the ones that who've still done well. I think just being able to like almost like read the market in sense when they're trying to effectively flog a dead horse and understanding that. It's probably a bit too much of a harsh way to put it, but I think entrepreneurs put a lot of heart and soul into their products and it's hard to let go of that sometimes. But no, I absolutely agree with that. And then kind of in the world of like fintech, startups, who would you most like to go to lunch with?
Honestly, it'd be maybe Warren Buffett, which isn't really fintech, but I'd just love to, have lunch with him just to learn. And then, but also in terms of like actual fintech, I think just Revolut, their high growth, the way that they've just conquered the whole of Europe and they've offered so many more products than just, using a card abroad. I think I'd love to, to have lunch with the founders and just learn from their kind of rocket ship because they're very inspirational.
I think they're relentless in their growth. I think it's something else. And my last question is, what's one thing that I haven't asked that you felt that I should have?
Yeah, I think it's related more maybe to how many customers are investing monthly through Curvo, which I think is really interesting. So,
Who's yours? Tell us.
Yeah, so we get around, we have like the 330 odds and around 55% of customers set up a savings plan. And so through the app, what we do is that through direct debit that you can set up an amount and you can change it directly in the app. And so like we're the first ones in Belgium to offer that. And so what we've noticed is that those are the best customers because they've developed great saving habits. And I think that's something that I think a lot of fintech products should try and push more is on that educational side. So not just like, here's a tool for investing called Curvo. It's like, here's Curvo that's going to help you develop good financial habits. And, here's a budgeting tool and here's how to figure out how much you can save. So that's one thing I think that's really, really powerful with fintech. And I really hope more fintech founders are going to, educate more through their product as well.
Awesome. Thomas, thank you very much for coming on to the FML podcast today. It's been great having you on.
Thanks, Shamir.
The FML podcast is brought to you by Growth Gorilla. To find out how our marketing growth experts can boost your fintech's growth, head to growthgorilla.co.uk. And make sure to search for the FML podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Growth Gorilla, thanks for listening.